She creates noise. She creates noise. She's moving through the world with a powerful voice. She creates noise. She creates. She creates noise. She creates noise.
Hi, you're listening to Sarah Nagurney, and welcome to She Creates Noise, a new podcast spotlighting women who power the music industry, coming to you from New York City. Now, if you don't know me yet, here's a little background. I'm a songwriter, producer, manager, educator, and mentor. I've written platinum-selling songs, had tracks on Grammy-nominated records, and released music on both major and independent labels. I've been a jazz singer, a jingle singer, toured with big bands, and became a pop artist, and I've performed at festivals across the US, Europe, and Asia. These days, I focus on writing with and developing young talent. In the coming weeks, I'll be pulling back the curtain on the music industry's female changemakers. Some are close friends, others I'm just getting to know, but all have reshaped the business in profound ways. My goal here is to help listeners better understand how the music business really works, and just how instrumental women behind the scenes have been. You'll hear from both sides of the desk: artists, producers, managers, label executives, lawyers, women making things happen, often without the spotlight on them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now let's dive in.
She creates noise.
Today, I'm honored to be speaking with one of the true icons of the music industry, Kate Hyman. Originally from the U.S., she was educated in England. Kate moved back to the U.S. to attend the University of Southern California and went on to hold senior A&R positions at several major record labels, something that was almost unheard of for women of her generation. Her career includes stints in A&R at MCA, Z Records, V2, Chrysalis, and BMG Music Publishing. She's been instrumental in the careers of artists like the Flaming Lips, Aimee Mann, Moby, Toots of the Maytals, the Cranberries, Tom Petty, and yes, she was once Madonna's roommate. Many younger women in the music industry today may not realize how much work it took for trailblazers like Kate to break through the male-dominated system. The doors that are now open exist because of women like her who refuse to be shut out. In this episode, we'll hear about some of those defining moments where she had to stand her ground and prove herself in a world that wasn't always welcoming. Kate is fearless, driven, and still deeply passionate about discovering and developing new talent. Her latest venture, Big Ears Music Consulting, is an artist development firm that's already making serious waves, drawing both indie and industry veterans eager to work alongside her. Just want to say a warm welcome to Kate Hyman. I'm so happy to have her here today. We've known of each other for a while. We've only met a couple of times on Zoom, and we're doing that again here, but it's very nice to have you, and I'm excited to get into all the cool stuff you've done. It was not a typical choice for women at the time. Tell us a bit about how you got into the business and what drew you to A&R, and also what did your family think?
What drew me to the music business was music. I loved music from when I was a little girl. Whenever I was sad, I would put on music and it would make me happy. It really affected me on a very deep level. Even when I was young, I tended to love things that were a little dark. My favorite artists were like Leonard, Cohen, and I loved Dylan, which a lot of women don't necessarily love. I loved Neil Young. He was probably my biggest influence. And I grew up in England and went to boarding school and at a very young age. And I remember whenever I was homesick or something, I was 10, I would climb under this table with my cassette player and play Harvest. And it just got me through the day. I mean, it was that powerful to me. So I didn't think that I was going to go into the music business. I just loved music. I went to Berkeley in California and studied archaeology and dead languages. And my dad was in the film industry. In fact, my grandfather bought Warner Brothers from Jack Warner. That's when it became Seven Arts.
Wow, that's so interesting.
My dad ran the studio in Los Angeles. So I grew up in England, but when that happened, I would spend a lot of time in Los Angeles. My parents were divorced, but I would spend the summers in LA. And so I was always surrounded by actors and producers and directors. And it didn't seem that glamorous to me. It was just my family's friends. So I was never really starstruck. It never seemed to me like anything other than
the family business.
She creates noise.
one summer. My dad said, because he kept sending me and paying for archaeological, well, for digs
Wow.
in
Where
the
did
Middle
you
East.
go?
The main one was a place called Meron, which is 8 kilometers from Lebanon. And it was actually during the war. So we had machine guns up in the olive grove and we had to learn how to use them. Pretty wild. But one summer, he said, you really should get a job. Seeing as you study dead languages and archaeology, maybe you should start, maybe doing a summer job instead. So he had a friend called Danny Cordell who owned a company called Shelter Records with Leon Russell. So at the time, which was the sort of 70s, I was hired as the receptionist. And they asked me if I could type. And I said yes. And I could not type, not even one word.
Gotta say yes.
So I was fired within a week. And then 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Shelter saying, we'd like you to come back and do A&R. Because when I was the receptionist, I was always listening to music that nobody had heard, that they really liked. And it was clear that I was going out to shows every night. And I grew up when I was a teenager during punk rock. So I was living in England during the Sex Pistols and Buzzcocks. In San Francisco, I was going to this club, the Mabuhay, and there were all these bands like the Avengers and from San Francisco. And then when I went to LA, that was exploding. And then eventually I came to New York and CBGB's, the Ramones, Blondie, Television. So it was weird. It's sort of like punk followed me around, or I followed it around. So I was kind of a punker punk rocker in terms of my attitude. I wasn't scared. I was sort of a bit of a fighter and not nervous, partially because of my family, but also just because I just always thought of musicians as people who had a job. I mean, much like anybody who has a job.
Yeah.
I never actually even thought it was cool. I thought it was fun. And it was great that they knew exactly what they wanted to do and needed to do it. It was like food or water for them, the true musicians, the true artists. And I just loved that. And I loved the characters because I was a little strange, people would say. And I totally identified with the artists more than the business side. And I always remember my dad saying to me, okay, you can be in the music business. You cannot be in the film business. Not that I would have listened to him, but he said, film business people, first of all, the more the money in a business, the worse the people are. So he said, the film business people are crooks posing as gentlemen. This is way back. And the music business are pretty decent people posing as crooks. So that was his opinion. So that's really was my first job, was working at Shelter.
And it might have been true back then too, right?
Kind of was. It kind of was. The Tommy Mottolas of the world, which was a little later. They weren't mobsters, but they all acted like they were wannabes, that kind of thing. I remember at Z Records, I was working with Michael Zilka's wife, who he'd signed, this girl Christina, who did a great version of "Is That All There Is," where she changed the lyrics. And Tommy was managing her, Tommy Mottola, and he said, hey, let's go for a walk. And we walked to the East River. And I was like, are you trying to intimidate me? Do you think you're a mobster? And he started laughing. But I was like, why are we walking on the East Village? That's apparently where people get thrown away into the water. So that was sort of the kind of vibe, and it wasn't serious. It really wasn't. So that was my first job and how I got into it. I fell in love with it. I worked closely with Tom Petty when he was making his second record, and with Leon Russell and with Jimmy Cliff. I love great music. Now that's very subjective, but I feel like I know exactly what great music is, and anything that is less than that is just not worth listening to and is taking up space. And I felt that way back then. Now, of course, now it's even worse. A million, 2 million times worse.
A lot of stuff out there, a lot of noise.
Too much noise. And it's very hard for young people and older people as well to find great music because a lot of it nobody's even heard, apart from maybe someone like myself who gets a link online. And I'm like, this is amazing.
She creates noise.
Right, yeah, and I want to talk to you more about how you find talent. I'm just going to mention, I didn't know about Tom Petty, but I was going to mention some of the artists that you've been involved with. The Flaming Lips, Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats, Aimee Mann, Henry Rollins, Toots and the Maytals, Moby, Marianne Faithfull, Kid Creole, Paula Cole, and many, many more. And I know you've been behind signing many of these artists, and I wonder if you could elaborate on sort of what singled them out, what made them like the right artist to sign at that time.
It was incredibly simple. I would put something on at the time, I would put a piece of music on. You would get sent boxes and boxes of cassettes in the beginning, and you were told not to listen to anything that wasn't sent by an attorney or by a manager. And of course, I didn't listen to those. I listened to all the things that were sent from the artist.
Wish I'd known you back then. I
um,
certainly sent stuff in.
I didn't feel like our attorneys necessarily had ears, and I didn't feel like I had to bow down to them. And a lot of the music came to me through word of mouth from people that I respected their taste. And I would listen to something, and either the hair on my arms would stand up, and I'd get this incredible feeling in my stomach and my heart. And that was that. That was why I would sign something. If it was good and people were talking about it, I didn't care. It had to be great for me. It had to be excellent. I wouldn't use the word unusual, but I would use the word honest, where when you were listening, you felt like you actually got to know the person. Even if you didn't, even if, because several artists come off stage and people go up to them and say, oh, I went through that too. And the artist just says, well, that was just a song, didn't happen to me. But it seemed very honest and not like everybody else. Like people would say, this sounds like so and so, or, they'd always compare it to something. And I'd say, okay, well, they already exist. So why would we need another one? Now, everybody listens to music or is influenced by other music. And I can tell sometimes what those influences are very quickly, but they use the influences in their own way. They make it their own. So that's fine. But if somebody would say, for example, particularly with pop music, that it sounds just like someone else, I'd be like, great, but you've heard one song and that does not make a career. You need to have somebody who is going to keep doing this and not, have a pop song not do as well as everybody tells you. I mean, I couldn't deal with the fact that people would say, this is a smash. And I'm like, no, it's not. The public will decide that. It's a smash when it's a hit. It's like, executives would try to say it beforehand. And so I always had a very clear vision of what I wanted to sign. And so it made it very simple as a job. I'd listen to something and there'd be piles of tapes. So I was like, nah, maybe. And as soon as I heard something great, I just toss it all in the trash because that was the one. So that's really how I figured out how to sign people.
Very instinctive, really. Just you went by your instinct.
It's instinct. And as soon as it's your heart, as soon as your head comes in in the beginning, it gets more complicated. Now you have to start thinking like at one point, after you love the music, is it a good manager? Can this person play well? Did they do a good show? Are they dedicated? Are they going to give up or are they going to continue? How many more songs do they have that I haven't listened to? I'd like to hear everything. And will they develop and get better and better and better? So that's when the head comes in. And then you combine the two and you make your decision. But I've signed things without my head, just my heart, because I just believe that if you're successful 1 out of 10 times, that's really good as an A&R person.
She creates noise.
The dedication is really big, isn't it? I mean, you can find so many talented people that just don't get it together.
Right. And luckily, I haven't worked with those people. Luckily, I've had people that are really hardworking, and you can kind of tell right away. And the music helps you see that because they pour their blood and soul and heart into their songs. And it feels like they need to do what they're doing. I'm married to a musician, amazing guitar player, amazing writer, producer. And if he doesn't play guitar every day, it's like deep depression sets in. It's absolutely vital. And it's got nothing to do with money or success. The success comes from the feeling of having done something well. Whether you're a floor sweeper and you've cleaned the floor properly. It's funny, people used to ask me what I did at clubs, and I would never say I was an A&R person. I would say, oh, I work in a bank or something like that. Uh, I just didn't want people to look at me a different way. They would find out later, but people would start fawning, and it was just awful. It was not something you wanted. I mean, I didn't want it. I think some people wanted it, especially men, I will say, because a lot of men took their personality and who they were and their importance very seriously. They took that. And women, I don't think they did it quite as much. It's like if I lost my job or something, I would, of course, get upset for a while, but I wouldn't think, who am I? I would say I'm the same person. I'm just not working right now for money in the music business, but I'm still an A&R person. At heart, that's what I do.
She creates noise.
Yeah, the question is really like, how did you kind of single out who was the talent that you were going to wind up signing? And I think you would really answer that question. And now here's a more colorful question. I want to hear some examples. I've heard you tell some stories. Women in executive roles in the music industry are still in the minority. What challenges have you faced as a woman in A&R, and what advice would you give to young women aspiring to be in leadership roles in this wonderful business?
I would say that from the beginning, it was almost like men patting you on the head. Well done. It was that kind of feeling. And that was from the guys who were okay. I think that women at the start, were only allowed to be publicists or publishers. There were no A&R women for record companies. I think me and maybe a couple of other women. That was it.
And you had some women mentors. I think you mentioned a couple.
Karen Berg was probably one of my biggest mentors. But when I went to her and asked her to help me get a job at a major, she said no. And I said, why not? And she said, because I want you to have a life. And a lot of women in the industry in the beginning, and still to this day, not as bad, but if they had children or were married, that was definitely a cross against them. It was a negative because men were allowed to have 12 kids and they had their pictures all over their desk. But if you said you were pregnant when you went in for an interview, they go, oh my God, look at the time.
I think you had mentioned that something like that had happened to you.
Well, there were a few things that happened. Well, first of all, I had 3 mentors that were men because there weren't a lot of women.
And we love men too, of course.
Yes. There was a man, well, Denny Cordell at Shelter, and then there was Nigel Grange, who signed Sinead and World Party and the Waterboys, and really was very supportive. But my main person, I think, who was the most supportive was Seymour Stein. We met, and he basically just took me under his wing, and he would call me and say, "What shows have you been to see?" And I trust your taste completely, so I'm going to go see that. And this is how it works. And A&R, a large part of A&R is doing nothing. A lot of A&R people want to put their stamp on it. There's ego, and a big part is listening to a record and saying, "It's perfect. Don't touch it." So he taught me that kind of thing. Very important things. Nigel taught me that the artists aren't your friends. They can become friends later on, but they're not your friends because your job is sometimes to tell them very difficult truths. And if you're not doing your job for them. So you don't want to hurt their feelings, but I've always been extremely blunt. And to the point of telling an artist that she has to fire the drummer, and the drummer happens to be her boyfriend. um, so he taught me how to be strong and do the job, which is to help the artist be better, just help them be better, and also navigate, and also defend them, particularly women, against the men in the company who said, "Oh, she's too overweight," or she's not pretty enough, or "Let's put her in this outfit or that outfit." And I was from the beginning always defending the women and pretty much telling the men they were disgusting. I was pretty outspoken. But there were, I mean, a couple of stories were at Capitol Records a long time ago. I was called for an interview. I had a job, but they said, "Come on and talk to us." I walked in, and the guy said to me, "I'm only interviewing, you're my friend, so I'm going to tell you, we're only interviewing women because we have to interview a certain number, but we're not going to give a job to a woman." So I basically went up to his desk and emptied it out onto the floor and walked out and never spoke to him again. Another time I went in and I was pregnant, and a lot of women in the industry forgot to have a family. They literally forgot because they were so busy working harder than anyone else.
There was a greeting card with that picture, I remember.
So they literally forgot. And I was like, I'm never going to be that person. I'm never going to forget to have a kid. And, it was before I even wanted to get married or have a kid. I was a wild child. I mean, I took as many drugs as the men. I drank them under the table. I was very badly behaved. I admit it. And
didn't know this. Now I know.
oh, yeah, crazy stories. But everybody was taking drugs in the industry in the 80s. I mean, that's just the way it was. People were sort of tripping over themselves because they were on Quaaludes and stuff like that. It was a very different time. But even the men those were my mentors, and they were just wonderful. A lot of the other men were very nice to me. I never had anybody that was nasty, but they kind of did that head tap thing. It was kind of like, well done. Good for you. Things that they wouldn't necessarily say to a man. But it's funny because now it's because of Me Too, it's gotten to the point where a lot of young women are still trying to find their way in that movement. And as with any movement that's important, the pendulum swings way far to the right in order for it to take on. And so, for example, when I was at BMG, a lot of the women started going to HR, which I told them never to do because HR worked for the label. And as much as they said they weren't going to say anything, they would tell the label you were a troublemaker. And they would say, I went into this man's office and he told me that the sweater I was wearing was really nice. Now, come on. You gotta have some kind of balance there. So I would recommend to women that unless they feel threatened or their boss is going after them, someone who's senior than them, or they really feel uncomfortable, but not because they're told to feel uncomfortable, they should really think about when to react and when not to react. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I guess some of these things are minor enough, and if you're going to go and complain about them, it depends on how important
yeah.
it really is.
If somebody told me I had a great new haircut, I'd be like, yay, thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. The pendulum swung too far. It's silly. Someone says you look nice today, and
It certainly did. But, and this is kind of personal, but I'll tell you, with the Me Too movement, I always said that never happened to me. I never was put in a position like that. And then I sat down and I really had to think about it, and I was. And it was really hard to admit. But some of these guys would want to sleep with you and put you in this really tough position that was uncomfortable. At the time, I was too young to understand or deal with it. But I had to come to that conclusion. And it was very difficult because I always said, oh, I was never one of those people. Never happened to me. But it did. It happened a few times.
but fortunately, it didn't seem to ever be a decision you had to make. Gee, if I want this job, then I have to do this. Or it was never anything like that. That's great.
No, no, it was never anything like that. But I was tough about it. I mean, if somebody tried something on, I would say to them, if you don't stop, I'm going to kick you in the balls. I was pretty tough about it. People used to say I was like a guy. I wasn't. I was just a strong woman.
Yeah, strong one. I've seen pictures. You're very cute, and you're still very beautiful. So yeah, I'm sure you just knew how to handle yourself. That was the secret. I know we talked a little bit about how you find talent, and I had heard some discussions about because you have a daughter. I guess she's a bit older now. She's 22, yeah. I think that was like 5 years ago. She was often helpful, telling you, "Hey, mom, check this out," or "Here's a playlist." Does she still do that, or are you?
No, we stopped because our taste is, well, she had wonderful taste in terms of the older artists. Like she loved the Kinks. She loved, like right now, she loves Fontaine DC Fontaine. She loves certain artists that I love. And I turn her on to music. Like she didn't know Lola Young, so I turned her on to Messy.
You turned me on to it. It's
Um,
beautiful. Love that. Love that song. Great song.
and but a lot of the stuff that she loved, I didn't. We have very different tastes now. There are certain things that definitely cross over. Like there's an artist that I have signed called Valerie June, who is one of my favorite artists ever. And she loved and loves Valerie. She also loves Marianne Faithfull. And Marianne actually became her godmother, speaking of becoming friends.
Wow, that's great.
So, yeah, it's so sad that she died last month. It was really sad. I'll send her stuff and she'll say, this is awful. And
Do you usually agree with her or not?
no, I send it because I like it. And then she'll say it's awful. And part of me will wonder because she's my daughter. So I'm like, well, maybe she's right. But I still kind of go with my own instincts. I love all kinds of music. It, anywhere from Brazilian jazz to Afrobeat to a lot of independent, a lot of singer-songwriters. Lyrics are very, very important to me. They're like half the song. And if there's a lyric that takes me out of a song, even one word, I'm out. Gone. Yeah, yeah. Everybody's different, but I see the artist as a whole. Whether when it's writing a song, it's cliches drive me crazy. There's only so many ways to say I love you. I actually teach at a school in England called the Songwriting Academy, and one of the classes was write along a love song without the word love in it, or moon, June, blue skies, and I made a list of the things that they could not put in the song. And a couple of the people just wrote the most amazing songs. They were fantastic. So there's that kind of thing that touches me is when somebody actually says something in a different way that you've never heard before.
She creates noise.
That makes sense. And similarly, still finding talent, like people get excited about what they see on TikTok and social media. Do you pay attention to that, or do you find much more different ways to locate
Yeah.
talent?
I found Valerie on YouTube, and it was just her on a stool with a guitar singing a song. So I tracked her down. I was like, oh my God, I have to find this woman. So that's one of the few that I found that way. A lot of them I found because another artist, I would talk to artists that I respected and ask them what they liked or who they'd met or who they'd seen that maybe was young and had some talent. I would always go to the artist. I trusted them more than anybody else. So a lot of it was word of mouth. I didn't really ever care about looking at the top 10 or looking at who had nowadays the most streams. I could care less. And I fight against that. And it's doable. It just is a little more difficult, but it's completely doable. It's not rocket science, the music business. And I think a lot of people try to make it seem that way so they can make up a job or get a big salary. But I'm like, I used to sit in marketing meetings, and once I literally said, I need oranges, I need milk. I was like, this is like, we're going marketing. Um, it was so boring. Everybody would say the same thing. There was no creativity. And that I find has been a little less with the indies, but very little creativity when it comes to marketing and selling records. Very little. At one point, you could buy off the radio stations, and yes, you could get a hit. You could choose an artist and say, I'm going to spend all this money and it's going to become a hit.
And those
Uh,
days are kind of behind us, I think.
kind
Kind
of,
of? Kind of.
kind of.
Yeah, not completely.
No, Spotify, YouTube, there's still some favors going back and forth. Maybe different kinds of favors, but they are going back and forth. It's not spoken about as much. I actually kind of miss the days when you could say this person's amazing, let's make sure everybody hears them. I kind of miss that because now it's such a toss up and it's so difficult for the artist to be heard. I think kids are getting sick to death of Spotify.
Right.
I hear it all the time.
TikTok, you know. I mean, I was kind of happy when TikTok was going to go away because I know people spend way too much time on content, and they're just not spending the time on the writing.
It's a lot of visual now, which I understand. I mean, it's a generation of people that are used to visuals, so the two combine. And so I do get that because, there is that star quality and you can't create it. You either have it or you don't. And that's another piece that's important to me is when someone walks in a room and you just feel this thing coming off, this vibe coming off of them where you're like, who is that?
It's really true.
So I do get it. And that's the other part that I forgot to tell you that is important to me.
Yeah, that
Is to
feel that's
have
star quality. Yeah,
a special feeling about them.
people just have that.
When I first saw Jeff Buckley play at Chenet, it was like he was washing the dishes. And that was this tiny little club where you could get up and sing if you heard about it, or you should go wash the dishes or just hang out.
I used to sing there back in the day.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, someone like Jeff, I was working at Imago, which was Terry Ellis's label. And I flew Jeff in from Los Angeles. I bought him a guitar for when he was in New York. And I brought him in and he was performing with a band called Gods and Monsters. And after the show, I said to him, that's not the band for you. And you really need to you are the star. You are obviously the person. And Gods and Monsters had a guitar player that just played all over his voice, and it just was awful. So he came to the office, and I introduced him to Terry Ellis, and I said, I really want to sign this kid. And Terry Ellis, after the meeting, said to me, he has no charisma. And I was like, are you out of your, am I not where? I was like, are you out of your mind? I mean, that's the kind of people that I had to work with sometimes. And it happens several times. I brought the Cranberries in, and Terry, again, flew to Ireland to see them play in Dublin. And he said that they all looked like potato heads, which is a British thing to say. And it's extreme extremely rude. And he turned them down. So I took them to Denny Cordell, who is at Island, who was one of my mentors from the beginning. And I gave it to him and said, will you please sign this? And he listened to the half of the first verse and said, they're in, and signed. So I would bring things, like I said, to other people because that's the way it is. I love artists and I love music. Not about me.
Right. It was the most important thing was to make sure it got heard.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people just, the men, and I keep saying the men because it was mainly men. And that also connects to, I work in a hospital or this when people would ask me who I was. They wanted to be the stars. And I feel like the job of an A&R person is to be in the background, not in the foreground. The star is the artist is the artist. And you're just there to help them in every way that you can. As the industry changes, to me, it doesn't really change at all. I think that the numbers game, now you don't shop records anymore. The artist has to somehow figure out how to get their numbers up, depending on who they are.
So the numbers game used to be signing a lot of people and see what sticks. Now the numbers game is come in with numbers or we're not even going to look at you. Really? Yeah.
I don't play that game. And I never have. Not with any artists that I've signed, even recently. Never. Or any artists that I work with. So that's not something that I find will last. It's something that very often is just pushed by the label, pushed up. And then there are these amazing artists that just go viral. And like a Lizzie McAlpine, those kinds of artists. That means the music is really good and you pay attention to them. But the numbers don't mean anything. And they also are disgraceful because the artists get paid nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
For sure.
So it's a game that when I work with an artist now, I try to help them understand how to work that. But it's just a necessity. It's not something that I find in the least bit interesting or important. And I feel like it's changing. Everything goes round and round and round. And because fans don't really care and there's too much out there and they're not happy with Spotify anymore and they're figuring out that the artists aren't getting paid, I feel like change is coming. But the main thing is, whatever it is, whether it's numbers, it's Spotify, it's TikTok, it's YouTube, it's about creativity, not in selling the record, not just making the record. And I don't see, I talk to a lot of different marketing companies and people who work with streams and social media. They all say the same thing. It's not interesting. It's not, like I said, it's not rocket science. And there's no creativity there. There's nothing like, hey, let's try this. This has never been done before. And somebody will say, oh, no, we can't do that. Or there's this thing called the waterfall effect, where you put out a song and it's not your best song. And then you put out another song, which isn't your best song. And then you put out the third song with the album. That's the rule. And I'm like,
and then it goes down in a waterfall, hopefully, and then you get numbers that way.
Why is that the rule? And secondly, why would you not put your best song out first? Why? I mean, if I go and do go to Spotify because somebody told me to go listen to something and it's not the best song, it's just good, not brilliant, I'm not going to go back and listen to any more. So I never understood that. So I fight against that. And when it comes to marketing, I am always telling people to put their best song out first. And then their next, all the songs should be fantastic. That's the goal. You shouldn't have filler.
Right.
There should be no filler. And as far as records, they don't really mean anything anymore except that people love to buy vinyl. And I love vinyl.
It's consecutive singles being put out.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for someone like Beyonce who can put out an album.
Exactly. But it just makes no sense to me not to put your best foot forward. It makes no sense at all. So I don't believe in the waterfall. And I won't. And I'll tell the artists that. And if they trust me, they'll go along with what I'm telling them.
She creates
Yeah, and to that end, I guess in a way that there are a lot more artists are staying independent. And I know you're now with Big Ears Consultancy. You are independent and doing it your own way. And how does that, what your experience in the past with majors compare with the freedom that you have now, and what are the pros and cons?
It's wonderful. I get to work with artists when they're not quite there, but you can see this spark and you can help them in an A&R way. And there's no A&R left at labels. It's researchers. If you're lucky, they'll listen to the record.
Right.
But
And they're like social media researchers, in other words, that kind of stuff.
there's no such thing as A&R. There's no such thing as helping somebody make a record. And the labels think that artists don't want A&R. Now, when I started Big Ears Music Consultancy, I was testing it out as well because I truly believed artists still wanted that help. And I was right. These young artists really want help. They want help with their songs. They want help to make them better. They want comments. They want to help with who might be the right producer or how to make a record when you don't have a lot of money. They want all of this. And they don't want to be on a major. The only reason they would go to a major is for the money, because they can't afford to hire somebody to work Spotify and YouTube and all those things. And eventually, if they're a pop singer, radio. So when it comes to that, I just advised this artist that they needed to break through England because I have partners in England now. So the radio there is regional and it's not as expensive. And you can actually get through as an independent artist without a lot of money. You can break there. The press still means more. There's still paper
They're
press.
so creative. Absolutely. It's such a creative place. Trying to think of other things. I know you had told it's amusing that you were Madonna's roommate. You can just tell us briefly about that. I'm sure everyone will get a kick out of that.
I was her roommate. When I was at Z Records, I signed a band called Breakfast Club, which was Steve Bray, and he wrote her first songs like Lucky Star. It was sort of him and Jelly Bean Benitez who wrote the songs. And he was dating Madonna. And she just moved from Detroit. And I had an apartment, really funky apartment, my first apartment in the city. And I had a spare room. And he asked if she could move in. So she moved in. And she was the worst roommate. I mean, she would, for me anyway, she would throw out the food from the refrigerator that was mine because it wasn't health food. She would get up in the morning at like 6 o'clock and start exercising and singing songs really loud with that bow in her hair. And finally, she became successful and got another place. Thank God. But she was a nice girl. I mean, she was very nice, but she just drove me mad. She was not the best roommate. That's the story. I mean, it's a very simple story. But I'll tell you, did I tell you the story of Marianne Faithfull?
No, you didn't tell me that story.
After I worked at Shelter Records, this record, Broken English, had come out, and I fell in love with the album. Absolutely did not stop playing.
And this is the beginning of your career, right?
Yes. And I met the producer of Broken English, Mark Miller Monday, and I managed to get Marianne's address from him in London. I flew to London. I got an apartment just like sharing with these girls that I didn't know. I biked over from Battersea to Chelsea, knocked on Marianne's door, didn't know her, never met her. And I said, "Hi, my name's Kate. I want to work for you." And this is in her first book, actually.
Those were the days, huh?
She said, "Go away, read Madame Bovary, Liaison Dangereuse, Nana, and then come back." So I biked back off to Battersea and read the books and knocked on her door. And she said, "Did you read them?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, then you're moving in. You're working for me."
That's fantastic. And how long did you do that for?
3 years I was living with her. And then
You lived with her?
Yeah, with her and her husband, Ben Brierly. And I was like her assistant manager, sort of. She didn't have a manager, so I was sort of playing that part.
That's great.
Um, and then many, many, many years later, she came to my apartment in New York City and she said, "Can I stay for a couple of weeks? I'm writing my book." So this guy, David, who was writing the book, would come over every day and tape her, and they would talk, and there were notes everywhere. And after 3 weeks, she started to paint the guest room pink. And I went, "Oh, this isn't 3 weeks." And 3 years later, she was still living with me. And I would come home from work. I was at V2. No, I was at Imago. And
But this was in New York or this was in
in
London?
New York, after, I mean, it was years later. It came very close. And after I would come home from work and she would be in her pajamas and Cheers would be on TV. And she would say, "How was work, darling?" And I'd be like, "Oh, it was fantastic." And she would, "I made you a chicken, a roast chicken. Let's go and sit and watch Cheers." It was like my she was my wife, my male wife, female husband, or whatever you want to say. It was the most hysterical relationship, but that's how it started. And nowadays, I don't think that happens that often, where an A&R person would go and just knock on someone's door because they were so in love with the music. They would call the lawyer, they would call the manager. That's not how I did it.
Yeah. Different world.
I have been so incredibly lucky in finding such amazing music. I mean, right now I am working with such good artists. So I'm doing the A&R for them, but I'm also walking them through the better marketing companies that don't cost as much and the people that I trust, the press people, putting a team together for them based on what they can afford. And sometimes when they can't afford anything, we'll figure out a way to make it work anyway. And I've been working with an artist for 3.5 years, and I promised myself I would never manage anybody, and I'm going to manage this girl with this guy in England. We're
Can
going to
you
manage.
can you share a name or is it too early?
Her name, well, you won't see anything, but you will eventually. Her name is Aimee, and then just the letter K. And she's this 22-year-old incredible writer, singer. She has that it factor, and she knows exactly who she is. She knows how to present herself. She's incredibly smart, and she was in theater, so therefore the stage is something that is not new to her at all. But she has to put a band together for this record. So
Is she in the UK or is she in the States?
she's in Chicago. But I've just found some amazing artists and also artists that are known that have called me through referrals and things like that. So they just need me to sort of be, I suppose you would call it the project manager, or the manager who actually gets paid. And I'm the one who talks to all the other people to make sure that they're all on the same page, that they're doing the right job, that kind of thing, which has made me, which I love because I've had to learn beyond A&R how to work the system. And it is called working the system to me.
She creates noise.
You're such an incredible resource. You've got all this amazing knowledge and
Well, it's fantastic because I'm learning every day and I get bored very easily. So to be able to learn something at my age still every day and work with people in their 20s is such a gift. I mean, I just love it. And I'm never going to stop. I'm just not. It's the same as my husband with his guitar. If I can't find new music and get excited every now and then,
I know
and
what else are we gonna do, right? We got to do what we do.
yeah, exactly. So that's sort of been my experience. And I would say to any young person, young woman who wants to get into this business, they have to have that passion. And if they're only doing it because they think it's glamorous, it is not glamorous. It's hard work. The men are still in charge. It's a boys' club. Ever since Me Too, it's almost become more difficult because the boys' club wants to stay the boys' club, so they're scared to hire women because they don't want to get sued. And they don't know when that's going to happen. So, to a certain degree, it's backfired. It's come back now. It's come back around, but for a few years there, it backfired and women were not getting hired.
So you feel that they are getting hired now?
A little bit more, but A&R is still missing women. And I also believe that women and men listen to music differently. And it's really important to have women listening with their ears and men listening with their ears. Um, I know for me, it's lyrics, it's the bass. I want to feel it in my stomach. Um, and with a lot of guys, and I'm generalizing, but it's, oh my God, that drum sound, how did you get it? Or um, a guitar or this or that. And I'm more focused on the person in front.
Right. Lyrics.
And musically, I just want to walk out and go, what a great band. Like, meaning to a certain degree that they didn't get in the way. Almost like with a movie, the music is there to improve the film. The film is not there to improve the music. I mean, I still know A&R people who've been doing this for years, and they will have an album finished, and they will actually say, you need to work to the sync department, you need to work the first track. And the sync department politely says, actually, we give the whole album to the supervisors, and they choose the track that works with the scene if you're lucky. But we're not working a single unless, of course, something comes along where it actually works. I can't believe that A&R people still don't understand that. Not all of them, but quite a few. And the marketing people, which is the other thing, which is that A&R people aren't, I don't think, involved enough in the marketing meetings at the major labels. They're the people that know the artist the best. They're the ones who can say, no, no, he or she wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that interview, or they wouldn't, no, they won't put that single out. That's not what they want to do. This is what they want to do. And A&R people are losing even more power. They really are.
Because it's all about the marketing. It's not about the artist. It's about what's going to sell or how they can sell.
Also, immediate gratification, like a single that works, not a career. And everybody's going to get, not every, people are going to get in trouble. They're really going to get in trouble because they're going to run out of artists and new artists. And you just watch the Grammys and it's the same people over and over and over and over. I think it's less so in England and certain other territories, and we ignore the rest of the world as if our music is the most important. And I just don't believe that artists are given what they deserve, the chance that they deserve. So they have to do it themselves. And that's fine with me because then they make all the money. And there's certain people that I would actually give a shout out to, like Tim at Partisan. Tim is incredible. He's the head of the company, but he's also the head of A&R, which is the only way it can really work because he can push, his name is Tim Putnam, and he can push what he believes in, which it used to be like Ahmet Erdogan and all those people were the head of A&R, producers, and also the head of the company. So it worked out really well. Now, honestly, it's just eventually I think it's going to go to AI in terms of the research.
I know we didn't talk about that too much. It's hard to cover everything, but is there anything that you would like to say that I didn't cover? Any questions I didn't ask? I know we didn't talk enough about your Big Ears consultancy, but we did a bit in that you found some great artists and
I found some great artists. I'm helping them grow. I'm doing exactly what I was frustrated by in the end at the labels when they were all buying up people's catalogs. And I was completely frustrated the more they talked about numbers. And I just wanted to make sure that I was correct. It was taking a chance, but I wanted to go back to the artist. I wanted to go back to them being the center of our business. So that's why I started it. And I wasn't sure if it was going to work or not. And it's taken 2 to 3 years, but it's working.
sounds great. The amount we've talked about it, I'm just so excited to see what happens with it. And it sounds like a lot of fun. And you can do it in your own way, in your own time.
And we're creative. I'm on the phone with the artist going, hey, what about this? And they're like, that sucks. And I'm like, or they'll say, what about this? And I'm like, that's a terrible idea. But we're connected and communicating, and it's really fun. We're not dealing with anybody at a label that is stopping us. It's just go, 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 which is magical. And the only other story I'll tell you is when Moby became enormously successful with play. I remember going out to clubs or dinners, and it didn't happen all the time because I figured it out the first time it happened. But somebody came up to me and said, congratulations. That's all they said. And I was like, for what? I literally didn't understand. I was like, did they think I just had a kid, or is it my birthday? And they were talking about Moby being a success. And I literally I couldn't connect the two. It just wasn't the way I thought. It was like, why are you congratulating me? You should be congratulating him. It just, you know, once again, being in the background.
That's terrific. Well, it's been so interesting talking to you, and I really appreciate your coming on my podcast. And I can't wait to finally air it and let the world hear your cool stories.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's fun to really think about it, really think about what you're doing and why. And so I really appreciate it. And, if any women have any questions, they can go to my site and I'll answer them.
I appreciate that. Thank you so
Okay?
much, Kate. Alrighty. Thanks so
All
much.
right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
She creates noise.
I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Heard City, the premier audio post-production company servicing the advertising, motion picture, and television industries right here in NYC. I'd also like to thank Ann Tello, aka XO Ann, for singing the She Creates Noise theme that I wrote. Thanks for listening to She Creates Noise. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share. I want to thank the team here, Blair Riley, Yelena Stevanovic, Emily Wilson, and the Master of Engineering and Grammy-winning Cooper Anderson. We'll see you next time.
She creates noise. She creates noise.